Katie, are you all set? You passed everything up? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we have a busy agenda, lots of interesting conversations tonight. And I'm looking forward to all of them. But first, I'd like to just recognize Caroline, who even at the last meeting here that she's going to attend is on her computer. It's okay to be on your computer. I'm just saying, you're right up to the end, which is one of the reasons we enjoy having her so much. You've been a great addition to the board. We really, really appreciate everything you've done. You've added a lot of energy and have kind of helped to deepen the level of student participation that I'm sure Aurora is going to take on for next year and whoever we get next year. But we just wanted to thank you very much for everything. Wish you the best of luck in your college. We know you're going to do great. You just have to promise to come back and tell us all the good stuff. And we have something for you that I'll let Patrick say a few
just
words.
A small token of our appreciation that I'll give to you. But thank you. You've been a great role model for other students, a great scholar athlete, and a very conscientious board member. So we really appreciate you giving us 2 years of your time, and don't come to the June meeting after graduation.
We'll have to send you away. Thank you. Okay, we move on to approve the minutes. We have two, one from April 29th, which was our board meeting, and then the May 6th meeting. Can we take, if everybody okay, if we take this together? But do let me know if there's any corrections. You found any? No? Okay, so can I have a motion?
I move to approve as written.
Great. Second? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. We are adjustments to agenda. Yes, we have one. We're going to move the climate change resolution policy discussion that Mrs. Wright and the students will be very happy we're doing, is going to now be 7.05 before the 7.1. So we're just going to do public session and then get right into it. And I think that's the only adjustment. Or do you have
11.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, 2 trips.
We have 2 extra trips that came up after the fact. So one is a cross country and one is Special Olympics. And those will now be 11.4 D and 11.4E. So those are the 2 additions. And I believe you got that emailed to you. And I think actually we just got a hard copy tonight. And is that it? Okay, that's it. All right. So then let's move to public session. If anybody was here to speak to the agenda or things on the agenda, for, against, or indifferent, now's your opportunity to stand up and just tell us your name and where you're from. No? Okay. Moving on, 7.0. So 7.05, we're going to move right into the climate change resolution policy discussion. Monica.
Okay, I want to be as live as possible. So thank you for allowing me to speak tonight to urge you to pass the resolution to address climate change through our role as a district. I'm Monica Wright. I'm a science teacher at Bath Middle School. I'm a taxpayer in Bath, and I have both of my children are students in the RSU. So on behalf of a growing coalition of educators and students and community members, during this busy time of year, I truly appreciate the time to discuss this policy and how the district can play a role in environmental change affecting our local and global community. So
I'm not even here.
I just sounded really fun. Okay. So many people have shown support and added meaningful to discussion to the document in front of you tonight. And I really need to mention Micah Depper because he's not here tonight. And he's the one who built this coalition of people. And he's the one who worked on the last 6 months on the multiple versions of this policy through feedback. He's not here because of the birth of his second child. So that's like a legitimate reason. The RSU1 won't wait. A policy resolution to address climate change is an opportunity filled with hope. The resolution before you tonight allows the RSU1 leadership to take positive change in that leadership role and the best way that we know, and that's through educating our students. And then educating them at the whole student at all levels. The education we provide is not just in classrooms with high quality instruction, but in the choices we make to run our school buildings, our transportation systems, and how we choose to spend our money. Acting our values is the education we can also give our students. The RSU1 won't wait policy resolution to address climate change allows us to have a time and place to gather ideas and people to continue work that individuals have already started to make our facilities, transportation, and food systems more sustainable. The working group would be required to present to the board and public, which makes our solutions more transparent. The local governments that work with the district will now have another group of people to implement regional solutions. Success feeds on success. And the best part, the students are going to be part of that entire process. If there are any others here tonight that want to show their support, want to give a little woo woo. Oh, maybe a little more woo woo standing. Yeah, like who's here to help support a climate change resolution that the RSU1 can? Thank you. Okay, I want to hear from the people who matter the most. Hold on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ren Coffinger, a sophomore at Morris High School, and a Rouseck resident, and a good friend of Mr. Depper, who is heading this project. I'm here to talk about the climate education aspect of this proposal. I feel fortunate enough to have been taught well on climate science through involvement in climate committees and internships. This education has greatly improved my knowledge on the topic, but also my decision-making when it comes to actions to work against climate change. However, I have learned a notably negligible amount from the school system. While I don't think anyone in the school will argue that climate change isn't real and that it doesn't have effects, I strongly feel the knowledge on the local outcomes of climate change are incredibly under-acknowledged within the student body. This can result in a major problem. Having seen how Rouseck has addressed climate change, it has become increasingly obvious that action against climate change is a community effort. The community needs to acknowledge the problem, and even greater than that, it is the community that must unite to take action. Now, if you spent any time in Bath, you know that Morris and Bath community are incredibly intertwined. Many of the people who graduate Morris stay or return later in life, whether after college or later down the line. The people being taught in Morris will become our community leaders in the next line of defense against climate change in Bath. The people who, like those here tonight, will need to take action. It is our duty to prepare them for the effects of our changing world, but more importantly, how to respond to and protect themselves from climate change. We must work together to embody our motto, think, care, act, by giving students the knowledge they need to address climate change, the sympathy to recognize its problems, and the confidence and support to act against it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elena Trundy. I'm a senior at Morris, as some of you know. I just want to say that climate change is having a direct impact on our community, whether it's rising temperatures or sea levels. I'm a part of the Morris Green Club, and obviously not every member could make it to this meeting, but when talking about this matter, serious engagement and concern arose. Many students feel passionately about taking steps to stop climate change. However, in order to take action as students, we need the adults around us to support us. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm available to.
Yeah, well, question, yeah,
Questions or
because I
blunt
think,
questions
no, we
or-
need, yeah, I think there are probably questions. So
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up to the board.
I would just,
Well,
just
yeah,
a
go
little
ahead.
little bit of history for the board. I think I put this in your backup, but this is something that Mr. Depper brought to policy committee, I don't know, a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. And we had a lot of discussion about policy versus resolution. And he's done a ton of research. And I think, I don't want to speak for the policy committee members, but I think we felt like a resolution was more appropriate. And so this is an opportunity for the board to ask questions. It doesn't need to be voted on tonight. And to me, I think it would be more of a vote of support if and when you're ready to do that. I think, my conversations with Mr. Depper was, we have another meeting in June. If you're not comfortable this evening, or if you have questions you want us to research. But I mean, as far as going into another school year, that would be the hope of the group that is supporting this resolution. So I'll
So
stop there.
just in terms of just logistics, when what is a resolution versus a policy? What is that? Like, if you vote on A, and it's not about the topic, just in general, if you vote on a resolution versus what is a policy, what does that commit us to?
I mean, it's a little looser than a policy, a resolution, not as strict. At the same time, if the board voted, I think what we're looking for is a vote of support so that the action steps that are within this document would be followed through on, and there would be a level of accountability, because part of what you probably saw on the last page was the committee coming back to the board, I think a couple times in the first year, and after that, once it's finalized, getting you to okay it and then and do this work.
Great, that's some good clarity. Questions, comments from the board? Jennifer, go ahead.
So I was in the policy committee when we talked about this, and I think that I did see I think we did want to engage our academics, our curriculum requirements that already exist
Mhm.
on this topic. So I think we made a change to that. But then I was reading it again, and I did have a question. One of the whereas statements says that that the city of Bath is requiring active engagement from all elements of city government, including the schools of the RSU1. And I was just kind of wondering what the city of Bath was requiring, like where that came from.
Yeah, I don't know. But
That's a great question.
Which one is it, Jennifer?
I'm not sure I can answer that truthfully. I know that the city of Bath has a climate policy resolution. Have I seen any relationship between the city and our town that's formal?
I
I think
haven't
it's all
seen
been
that.
informal at this point in terms of student groups openly working with the sustainability executive director that is part of the city. But I also don't know if it like this, that's why I like this resolution, that it provides an actual voice of like who we are as an RSU. And that's who we want to talk to when the city needs to be able to communicate with us. In addition to the administration, of course, because I think right now there's so many individuals in the RSU that are doing small, great work, but don't have a gathering place of like, how do those come together and even know what each one's doing? In terms of even our different buildings, we don't have a lot of opportunities where we share common regional types of solutions. So that would like what's going on in Woolwich isn't always something that I know that was happening at BMS. And then those can be communicated with how we're addressing issues the city also cares about, such as flooding and moving buses around the community to take our students home when the flooding exists, and bigger issues that both of us are dealing with.
Okay, and the reason I asked, it's just a little, I was thinking about the wording about the city of Bath requiring something of the RSU, because I would understand maybe if the city of Bath required that of the buildings located in the city of Bath. I don't know how the city of Bath could require that of the RSU buildings not located in the city of Bath. And it was just, I was just kind of reading it over again, thinking that I don't think that's the intent at all, but
So maybe that's an area would like some revision to make it more clear that the requirement doesn't make sense, but to have communication so that we're coordinating our efforts when things such as flooding and the streets are flooded. How do we get our students back home or to school?
Right, in all the towns. And I loved the, on that same page, paragraph A says that, that the program is, wants to convene a work group with members of all local governments from the towns of RSU. I think that makes sense to include those municipalities in all of our towns. I think that's a wonderful way to connect us in that way. And that it would be to make sure that all those voices were being heard, the school voices and the townspeople. So that was just the only place I had a lingering question about. So thank you.
Thank you. Hope I
Jamie.
answered that.
I just want to say that I fully support this effort and have watched the progression of how Micah has brought it forward and very collaborative minded. And I really appreciate that about this committee. I think just to answer, Jennifer, one of your questions, that the city of Bath has reached out to a number of people that are connected with RSU1, whether they're educators or community partners, to make sure there's representation. And I think that coordination on their climate committee. And I think they just started that process last week. And I agree with you that in A, where we're talking about convening a work group, I would love to very specifically state from each town that RSU1 serves. And then, a couple of the questions that I had as I continued to read.
Lost my
down
phone,
through
Kat.
this.
Sorry.
Are you throwing
Sorry.
things at me, Lou?
Yep.
Is, on page 2 under B, where we're producing climate literate workforce ready citizens, what does that look like? I would love to see maybe a little bit more specifically what that looks like. And then my other just thoughts again is on page 3. It kind of like skips over a bunch of process, I think, where it's like once the plan is adopted, well, what are the steps to get this plan adopted that they want to have? I think one of my concerns is I don't want to handcuff us in tight budget years to say, well, we voted on this resolution last year, so we have to replace all of our heating systems district-wide. That there's a process that this would have to go through and kind of outlining what that process is.
Like how they make recommendations.
Exactly,
Yeah, it's like
exactly.
If the committee has recommendations, how do you make the recommendations?
And how is it
And yeah. and that's-
supported by the full board, so it's still just an ongoing process. But I think it's great. And one thing that I think is important, since we're talking about mental health so much tonight and every day, is one of the things that I learned from our young people in a World Cafe event last spring was climate change was one of the top things behind school
Stress.
shootings that stresses them out. So I think it would be behoove us to empower young people to feel like they can be part of the solution, but then also see, leadership saying, yes, this is important and we want to empower you all and all of us to come together around it. So
That's great. Anita, did you have? She covered everything.
sorry.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So you agree with Jamie. All right. Yeah, Kurt.
Monica, I was just wondering, piggybacking on what Jamie said about students, are there any ideas or expectations? And I apologize if it's already covered in here. I was trying to see that for student involvement. And I don't know if you're the best person to talk about that or if you want to defer to.
I think the model we had before when we had a solid waste committee is that there was a student from every school on that committee, and that this one is even more important, that there would definitely be student representation on any kind of working group. And maybe the working group would be too big and there would need to be subgroups, of course, because to involve students from every school, including even Dyke Newell and Fitchburg, and which, with younger grades would be important, but maybe not part of every single committee member. And then once there's a funneling of how we can gather these ideas from other districts, I think that's when teachers like, oh, I have a group that really has a project that they can speak to. And that's when younger students even can be involved. So yes, 100% students' involvement.
Any other board members? I would just like to say, yeah, I based on what everyone else is saying too, I don't think we have to have all the specifics, because some of it is you're going to need time to figure out what's the best way. It may change, it may do this, but I think a few more specifics, just understanding that the procedure would be the committee making recommendations that the board should work with. But I do also like very much I love the be here, but producing climate literate workforce ready citizens, that permeates everything we teach and everything we do. That makes a lot of sense. But again, with the working group, having a few more details about what that would look like. I do like the idea of finding out what's already happening, because everyone may not be aware we bought into a solar farm. That's a thing. People aren't aware of some of the stuff that's already happening. There's a lot more to do, certainly, and I think people would want to do all of that. But just having a few more specifics about what we think that could look like. And I know that's tough because when you're including the other towns, Bath's still figuring stuff out. They're still trying to figure out their priorities and what does it mean as a working group and stuff. So we know it's evolving, and I get that, but I think a few more specifics, and I think the board would be pretty comfortable passing that resolution. So maybe if everyone's okay with it, we get a few more specifics for the June meeting, and then we could pass that, so then you can get your everything going, so it's going into the fall. Does that sound?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think even having this public forum now, you might be getting more feedback from the community for ideas and how to make sure that what's happening. And then that gives us a month to be able to vote on it.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. We just want a little more structured, so it's kind of solid as to how we're progressing. But I'm well aware that something like this will evolve and, could look different in December. But that's okay, because we want to make sure we're all starting on the same page in the right direction, knowing there's certain things we absolutely know we want to do and some other things we may not know yet. And that's okay too. But it's just about, I think, a little more structure, so we know, what are you asking of us? So when you come in, kind of look at the working group, what specifically are you going to, you're going to recommend things to us. And as other board members have said, we have to, some of it could be due to budget. It could be goals we set up and say, yes, by this date, we want to be moving toward this. Certain things are going to save money in the end, but an initial investment, but then it saves. I know because isn't Morse, we could plug solar into Morse. We made sure that when it was built, it had it. We didn't have the money to get solar panels at the time, but things like that. So a real analysis of where we are. So I think if we can do that, and like you said, this is good because if people are watching or people will hear about this, we may get some more feedback. Oh, you need to think about this or think about that, and then you can come back in June, and I think we'd be ready to move forward with that, so people can.
So just to
do
be clear,
something.
what I'm hearing you guys say is that the last page with what the role of the board is the part that you want the most attention.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense? You all said?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Does it make sense to invite them back to the policy committee?
No.
Okay.
No, just bring something to if you have questions, feel free to get in touch with us during the month. You don't have to wait till the next board meeting. If you have any questions or you say, hey, we're thinking this, does this make sense? I'm happy to show up at a meeting if you want. I'm sure other board members would be too. So just, keep in touch.
I'll come see you and we'll work out some details.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds
That'll work.
good.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Monica,
Appreciate it.
guys,
Thank you.
could I ask
Go
one
ahead.
more question? All right. I guess it might be too early for this, but it might be a good idea if we're going to be voting on adopting something that we'd want to have a better, more comprehensive understanding of all the resources needed, whether that's staffing or funding, et cetera.
So that's part of the working group list of things that were required, like how to support staff and budgetary constraints, if there would be. Are you saying you want that before the resolution's even passed?
No, I think, aren't you asking, is there a cost up front for putting this together at all? You passed the resolution.
Oh, to even have the working group meet.
Right. Is there, because you just have to think, is there, how much time is it? Are people willing to volunteer? Are you looking for some funding even for that? I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess also, if certain things in here like commission and audit, et cetera, just to have an idea of what that might look like, if that's possible at this point, which may not be for the
Okay.
next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say everyone wants this to work. We just gotta, get some things refined and we can make it
Yeah.
work. Yeah, no, it's exciting. I'm really glad everybody's, thank you to all of the staff, all the students, everybody who's, put the time and effort into this, because this is looking really good. So we appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right. Next, 7.1, the main health MIYHS presentation.
It's my pleasure to invite Melissa Focasato up to the microphone. She's here from Maine Health, and she is the Director of Community Health. And she's going to review the results of the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, MEHAS. Last year, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, I did present some of this information to the board. I believe it was last year, and then we were waiting for these results to come up. Maine Health is able to do an even deeper dive with the data, which is why we wanted to invite Melissa to come present to us. And you all have her packet. It's the one with the red stripe. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks so much for giving me a few minutes here at the board meeting to present some of this data. And I've also baked in some time for questions, and I'll keep an eye on that. So again, I'm Melissa Focasato. I'm the Director of Community Health for Midcoast Hospital. But I also talk about how, although I work at Midcoast Hospital, I really work for the community. And I'm involved in many of these coalitions that we have on this slide, as well as many working groups, including the Working Community Challenge group out of the United Way. And many of our staff work with Jamie on the Midcoast Youth Center and with Katie for several. So we're very integrated into the community, working beside you. So when we talk about some of these results, especially for anyone listening in, I always talk about how this is a reflection of how we're doing as a community, not necessarily how we're doing as school departments, but this is where the kids are, right? So this is where we will survey them, but you'll see woven in throughout this and at the end a conclusion of what we can do together to address some of these issues. And we're going to talk about what's going well as well. So there's a lot of data in the MEHAS. We're really covering areas tonight that I know of particular concern tonight with you. That's the mental health and substance use numbers, as well as areas where there's been a change or where maybe a school in RSU1 differs from the state averages. But I am happy to have coffee and talk about every single data point in this. So a little bit about the background on the MEHAS. The local data you'll see in this presentation comes from the 2023 MEHAS, which is a collaborative effort between the Department of Health and Human Services, Maine CDC, and the Maine Department of Education, and the schools that participate. So thank you. It has been administered every 2 years in Maine since 2009. There are separate surveys for middle school students. We actually, when we say middle school, we're looking at 7th and 8th students, not 6th grade, and one for high school students, which covers grades 9 through 12. The data are collected, cleaned, and made ready for release by a contractor who ensures the data is accurate and representative. And if you have any questions about that methodology, there's a methodology report that I can point you to at any point. And then a note about completion rates, very robust for RSU1, and we really appreciate it. 82, 81, and 85% for your schools. What this tells me is, especially for those schools with a higher number of students, this means that this trend and this data are particularly informative and tell really, I have a higher confidence in the story it's telling when you have this participation rate. So we really appreciate that. And we appreciate all the students that take this anonymously and tell us what's going on. And so again, really a thank you for that. So I'm going to start with the question that's always of a concern for the community, and that's what is the mental health status of our students? If you look at this, this is the high school rates. Orange is the Morse rate, and the state is the blue dashes. So as you can see, there's been an increase in students who have experienced signs of depression and considered suicide since 2017, and this is looking in the past year. The steepest increase came between 2017 and 2019 and has been relatively stable since. Both are higher than state average at this point, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. And again, this is the reason that we pay to have this analysis, because if you look at the PDF online, you don't quite get this trend data. So I really like to look at a trend over the past 5 to 10 years and not just over the past 2 years, especially when 2 years ago we were dealing with COVID. So this is why this is great analysis to have. When we look at middle school mental health status, note that the high school rate is for the past year, middle school rate is for a lifetime. So we have to be careful not to compare them. A lot of times this kind of makes you take a breath, but remember, we're talking about ever when we're talking about middle school. Have you ever experienced signs of depression or ever contemplated suicide in your life? This question was not asked at a level to get school level data until 2021, the depression screening rate. But as you can see, if you look at the last two, again, it's just 2 years worth of data. The sad and hopeless rate is trending down for both schools, with suicide considerations starting to trend down for BMS, which again is orange. Woolwich, which is in red, has fewer students. So that's why that data point, it's difficult to measure trends with Woolwich, and it's going to go up and down a little bit. But it looks like perhaps that is also trending down. So again, a word about significant. I'm using this as a statistical term. It's not a reflection of the actual difference. So I always like to tell people that. And although when you look at that PDF or look at these numbers on paper, the rates may look different, but unless we say they're statistically different, which means they fall outside this confidence level, that means we're confident that they're different. So, and this will be noted in the slideshow if we're looking at that data online. So be careful when you're talking about trending that it's a statistical trend. And you can see that the mental health rates of more students are worse than state average, a little bit higher. At state average are the number of students who were, when sad and hopeless, reported getting help from an adult, which is what we want them to do. And 45% of youth who feel like they matter to their community. Again, those are at state average, and we'll touch on that near the end as well again. If you review the RSU1 results, you'll notice that the number of students who felt at least one of their teachers cares is declining for Morse. So again, Morse is on the right. I wanted to let you know this rate fell significantly among high schoolers statewide between 2017 and 2023. So Morse is not alone in this. So I just wanted to bring this up that you may see this, but no, you're not alone. This is not any different than what's going on. So the top row are high schools, to the left is the main rates, and to the right is RSU1. This result was statistically significantly worse at Bath Middle School compared to Maine in 2021, but has increased in 2023. And now at both BMS and Woolwich, we're at state average of students who feel like at least one teacher really cares about them and gives them support. It's also very important when examining mental health rates to recognize that some youth experience these mental health concerns at a higher rate than others. Included in these groups of students of particular concern are youth who identified as female, LGBTQ, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, especially youth who identify as transgender. You can also see that in the call-out boxes to the right, transgender students were also much more likely to have attempted suicide and reported forced sexual contact in their lifetime. In this slide, the darker red and the darker blue are the proportion of students in those groups who answered yes. The lighter red and blue answer no's. For instance, if you look at that top red, about a quarter of all males indicated signs of depression in the past year. That's in the dark red, versus almost half, or 46% of females. So we broke out male and females, and in those groups looked at who had a higher rate of depression. I'll give you a second with that one. That's why it's easier to look at it in your packet, and we'll come back to that if we need to. When looking at substance use rates of Morse high school students, there's no statistical significant change between 2017 and 2023, and they're all at the state average. There's not enough data to determine vaping rates since 2017 because we didn't think to ask about vaping in 2017. We sort of learned that one was coming, right? And we had to change up the questions. But we know when compared to 2021, that the main high school rates are down about 2%, middle school's up about 1%, and that's about the same reflected in the RSU1 rates. So I was really worried that we'd see that spike after the pandemic, and we're not. So I just want to say kudos to all the work the schools are doing and the public health community are doing to really address this, because it was really one of our highest concerns. So again, a few other substance use questions. We look at binge drinking. This is when we're asking if you did you drink 5 or more drinks in a row, which is a really concerning trend to see. That rate and early initiation rates are at state average. I also want to talk about protective factors. These are things that we can do to protect kids and address this. I often get this question, this is pretty hard thing to look at. So what can we do? So in addition to increasing awareness of risks, which we often always immediately go to, we must teach, increasing protective factors can also decrease substance use and improve mental health status. Protective factors are characteristics of individuals, a feeling of positive self-worth, positive relationships, a feeling of self-control, and conditions, things like, do you have social support? Do you feel like you live in a caring community? That correlate to lower substance use rates and better mental health rates and outcomes. These are also measured by the MIHAS, and we're going to look at how Morse rates compare. So we measured 6 that I've brought up here. Light blue is Maine, dark blue is Morse. We looked at these 6 measured, 4 at the state average, but I want to look at number 5, which is the schools cares about students. How often do you feel the people at your school care about students and encourage them? More students answered this at a higher rate than the state average. So good job, more staff. Number 6, and you also know this, that the percentage of students who have reported 4 more ACEs is higher at Morse High School. Your students are dealing with more than the average Maine high school student, so they need to be a little more support than maybe some other students. These are things like abuse, neglect, poverty, racism, violence, separation from parents. We also pulled out Woolwich had some even more positive change, so we pulled that for you. You can see that suicide and mattering to the community are statistically better when comparing 2017 to 2023 or this 2023 to 2017. They also feel safe at school and bullying statistically significantly better comparing 2021 and 2023. But again, I do caution that there's also fewer students, so just a couple of students may change that rate, but that's a good trend, very positive trend. And finally, when we ask about who RSU students who feel like they matter to their community, that between 2017 and 2023, that did decline, but it did better in Woolwich. So it declined at Morse, did better at Woolwich, and stayed steady at BMS. So this is where we all need to do more as a community, and that's where I'm going to wrap up my remarks and open to questions. So we all have a role. This is my next 2 slides that talk about what is being done and what we can do more. We've invested a lot in student mental health and youth mental health from Midcoast Hospital, and we're doing a lot with the community. You may have heard of our mental health first aid courses that we're offering for free throughout the community, and I encourage everyone who has not to sign up for that. And that's just like a CPR class. You're not asked to become a counselor or how to treat, but how to recognize crisis and how to connect a youth to help. We also do a lot of work with youth. We have sources of strength for middle and high schools. We have a Youth for Action Council. We just started at Brunswick Junior High, and we'd like to replicate. And I believe we've gone to Brandon at BMS to talk about that. We have a Community Health Improvement Fund that your schools have applied for, and this is money to improve or extend the number of activities so the kids feel involved and feel like they matter, and really looking at those kids that maybe aren't involved and why aren't they involved and what could we do to get them more involved and more supportive. We have many substance and tobacco use prevention. You may have seen the signs when you came in. Those were from our coalition. There's the new tip line of speak up. If you see something, say something is what you do. Internally, we took that at a community level. If you're in the community at any time and 24/7, you feel uncomfortable calling the police, then you can text an anonymous tip if you feel you're worried about anyone, a family member or a friend. My staff is currently reaching out now and has a meeting set up with all your schools to talk about what we can do and what we can start in the fall and continue. So they'll be getting a call on that. And then finally, it's all about community collaboration, as you know. I've mentioned the Southern Midcoast Communities for Prevention. We all know about Midcoast Youth Center, all the work they're doing. You're having your second Bath Pride. I was part of the first Bath Pride, and seeing the number of kids downtown celebrating and being their authentic selves was just great. We're working closely with Maine Youth Action Network on restorative practices and how to bring those to communities and schools. And we work very closely with Out Maine on how to make sure all students feel supported in their school. So that in 10 minutes was a high level summary of the MIHAS data. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions or bring information back to you.
No, that's great. Very well done. Very, very good. Open it up to the board. You have questions? Any questions on the stats, what they look like? Jennifer?
If anyone else needs to ask questions, please.
They will.
Go.
ahead.
I'm interested in some of the questions,
Mhm.
and I was interested how they combine the words sad and hopelessness, because they seem to be two different, to me, I think of them, not any kind of medical standing, but a vast difference between the two.
It's a great question, and that question is actually a screening question that's used universal. So I believe it's one question that's asked in the MIHAS, and it's one that's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's the same question they would get at, and I think it's whether you feel either or. If kids respond that they're feeling sad or hopeless, that's a sign of depression. If they've said it's more than 2 weeks in a year, and I think the question is something so much that you've stopped doing things. So it's a longer question that you can certainly pull the PDF and yeah, absolutely.
And is this one of the ever in your life or currently?
High school is if you felt sad or hopeless for the past 2 weeks in the past year. Middle school is ever.
For all questions?
No, for the sad and hopeless and the suicide question in
Okay.
particular, the mental health questions.
2 weeks. Okay.
Yep.
It was interesting also then on another slide, you used the word depression, not sad or hopeless.
I think when I say depression, because we'd already talked about that, I condensed it. But whenever I say when we're measuring depression, it's based on that question.
So that is the same.
That
thing
is the
as-
same question,
Gotcha,
yes,
okay.
which is a screening, depressive screening
Okay.
question, yes.
And then for the vaping,
Yes.
vaping, was it specific vaping nicotine versus cannabis? Was there a breakout in what they were vaping?
Yes, there's several questions on vaping to ask that, and I didn't pull those, but I certainly can. But yes, and I think we've learned, right, that, and there's a question about, do you know what you vaped, I think is a question, and one of the concerning questions statewide is, although not, a very high percentage of these devices have nicotine, a very small percentage of you think that they had nicotine. And so there's a lot of confusion about what's in those vapes. But yes, we do ask what's being vaped, and there's several questions on that.
And do they ask if they're flavored, like candied, like
Yes,
flavored?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And I can tell you they're flavored. I mean, I don't have to look at data to tell you that anything a kid is using is going to be flavored.
And no other year past that? Like, I know you didn't have 2017.
Right.
But it would be interesting to see if there are any other years.
We have it at the state level, but we didn't, again, because adding a question to a tested, it takes a little bit survey. So we didn't get it at the school level until 2021. I think I can get it at state level at 2019,
Okay.
but they didn't. And it was an uproar when they didn't include it. I think Jamie helped me to say, we need to know this at the school level, which is why it was included in 21.
Okay.
But it kind of snuck up on us. And thank God for the SROs that came to our meeting and said, something is very going on. Backpacks are smelling very fruity. We're like, what is going on? And literally, that's how we
Yeah.
found out that vaping has started. And then we started, and then science catches up. So your staff knew, before we knew at even the public health level. But yes, I forget why you asked that, Jennifer, but yes, that's like, I wish we had it going back, but that was like an epidemic, the way that just shot up over literally a summer. So.
It was coming
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah. No, it actually wasn't coming a long time. It was, they got out in June. They think something's going on. We came back in the fall, and it was like probably 55 to 75% of kids had vaped over the summer. It was really quick. It's the
Wow.
fastest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
And my last question was, it said, RSU1 students who feel they matter to the community.
Yeah.
What's a community to a student? Or-
That's a good question for your students, I would ask.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
community that, I think that the intent is to your general community. So there are a lot of questions about school, but that's a great question. I would say to any adult ask your student that. What is the
Right.
community to you?
Right.
And where do you feel valued and where don't you feel valued?
And the last thing is some of the resources. There's a very powerful set of videos from the U.S. level of tobacco compliance that I don't know why that's not called Do the Right Thing. I don't know why that's saying, but they're very visceral videos. What's the name?
Oh my gosh, of course you'd have to,
I'm sorry.
Tobacco Free Kids, and it's, oh my gosh, my tobacco prevention specialist
I
is
know.
going to kill me. I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, we use them.
And they're like having their anniversary to show
Yeah,
how
yeah.
impactful they are, and they are a little, gross when
Yeah,
they show, but
But they're
really-
tested, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
Center for Tobacco Free Kids. No, I'll think of it as soon as
Yeah.
I sit down. But yeah, and those
Thank
are what I love about those is they're tested with youth. Like youth don't want to say, if you use this, you could get lung cancer in 50 years. So what they want to hear is you're being manipulated because we can't make money unless we hook you now because 30-year-olds aren't going to get hooked. And that's what they do.
Right.
And which is the Truth Campaign.
The truth.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Okay, they're videos. They're a bunch
Yep,
of videos
yep,
they made.
yep.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it
Truth.
wasn't the Truth
Yeah,
Campaign, but
okay.
it could be something else.
Very
But
powerful.
yeah, check out the Truth Campaign.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else have questions, comments?
Great questions, by the way.
Katie?
Thank you.
Kate?
If our students feel comfortable, I would love to know how you feel when you look at this about your own school. And if you feel like it's relevant, connected, accurate, and if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine.
I guess I think that a lot of it about the LGBTQ health is very accurate. Even though I think Morse is like one of the most accepting communities I've ever been to. And Bath as well. We just talked about Bath Pride. It's still, because it's so, I guess, universal in the fact that it's not entirely accepted, especially with the increase in anti-transgender legislation that's been passing recently. A lot of students in that demographic feel hopeless, which I've witnessed among my own friends and then distance acquaintances. So just focusing on that within the school community would be very helpful.
The old microphone today. Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it honestly makes me a little bit sad looking at it too, because like all the people that, obviously it could be anybody that feels this way, but I want to say, and it's difficult to speak for everybody, especially with topics like this, but like the school board, the Morse community, the community of Bath, it's like also one of the most welcoming places I've been. Like I moved when I was younger, and the community that I could have been in if I didn't move is like not as accepting as this one. And I think that even though like suicide or sad or hopeless rates are strangely high at Morse compared to the state averages, I think this board and school community just does a great job, I think, at appreciating the students and making sure that they matter. And there's so many extracurriculars for students to be involved in. Students are comfortable starting their own clubs. I think that's great. So yeah, that's my input.
Do you think that there's a factor that you're saying, I don't think it's usual that in some ways maybe it's higher, but maybe they feel more comfortable expressing. Doesn't mean it's that much different than other places in Maine. I know that's a hard thing to prove one way or another, but I think if you have an environment where you feel safe, there may be more students who feel comfortable saying, well, I felt depressed or I felt this.
Absolutely, yeah.
I noticed in a survey where if you're in a different community, not everyone, even if it's anonymous, they're just going, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, yeah.
Then you have to see, because you said there's a high rate of respondents, when you may have some communities where it's not as high, and then it's lower. And so, I know that's when you get into the world of statistics.
Right, exactly. And that's why I always talk about that this is a lot of correlation, like constant, you can't really tie all these together. Absolutely.
Yeah, speaking personally to this, I remember taking the survey when at school, and it was when I had just moved here, and I know for a fact I lied on some of those questions. And now I think if I took it, I probably wouldn't, because I know that the school is definitely here to support me no matter what.
And I can
There
speak,
you
because
go.
I hear this a lot, like, how do you know, right? And just so that you know that there are ways that this is designed. And so if someone completely randomly filled out all Cs, right, then some of those things wouldn't match up. And so when they talk about the analysis, they do a really good job analyzing this data and making sure that things make sense, because we hear that a lot, that especially with schools that don't want to face it, which I don't think Morse is one of them. Like, well, that's not true. They're just, how do you know? Well, because you're comparing it to the rest of Maine. So why would, so there's a lot, but right, we do hear that sometimes, but I'm pretty confident in this data and the numbers that we're having, especially when you look at trends, right? That's what I usually look at. Instead of that point in time, look at the trends. How are you doing compared to 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago? Because then you're comparing more apples to apples in your own school. And you can see that line is flattening, which is what you want to see. And then after flattening, it's going to start to go down, right?
That's great. Any other comments, questions? Thank you so much. That was very,
Thank
very
you so-
meaningful presentation, and take it very seriously.
Yeah,
we
and thank you for
that.
participating. It's because of the participation rates that we have this data, and we have some of the programming that we can do. So we really appreciate it, and we appreciate you all.
That's fantastic. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you too. Thank you. Okay, got some real deep stuff tonight. Let's move on to, speaking of that, student board representation report. What's going on aside from prom, or including prom and everything else? Let's hear about it.
So for starters, I'd like to say AP exams are finally over. So that's a lot of students are feeling very relieved. All done, all of them. I know a couple students who have makeups who have to take them, but in general, they're all done. The school also finally received a yearbook, so we're going to be passing those out soon. Academic Awards Night is this Thursday, where we'll be recognizing a lot of students for their academic achievement. And Unified Literacy and I think Science went to the Botanical Gardens today, and they had a lot of fun on their field trip.
And for mine, we had prom, but I just wanted to say, put it on the record, thank you to everyone who helped out. It was so fun. I had no part in helping out, so I really appreciate everyone all the juniors who set it up and all the people at the golf course who worked it. It made it very fun. And last Thursday, I think, senior tea happened. I think it was the 71st senior tea, which is exciting. Miss Nichols told me that there's progress improvement on the progress for an amphitheater and a raised garden bed in the back, kind of by the teacher parking lot, which is awesome. And the process for selecting juniors for NHS has begun, I think. People are submitting all of their... People got their letters last week. So that's awesome. Congratulations to all the NHS students. BMS Step Up Day at the high school is this Thursday, the 24th. And Scholarship Night for seniors is happening soon, I think. And I also wanted to thank the board for giving me this opportunity. I've had a great 2 years, and thank you for the cute little card. Thank you, Lou, for writing all my letters of recommendation. Yeah, I love being here. I've learned so much. So thank you, everyone. Yes.
Vassar, yeah. Congratulations. All right, any questions for the students? No. So how's that NHS? So the juniors find out now in the spring?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we applied in like late March, I think, and then we just got
okay.
our letters. And our first meeting, I think, might actually be tomorrow. I have to check the email.
Okay, I couldn't remember when the
yeah.
timing, because I remember over COVID it all got screwed up with the timing, so I wasn't sure if it was spring or fall. Okay, great. Superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a couple items. BMS Play, it was our first theater production with the new sound and lighting system that we've talked about that we bought. Murder at St. Rose's. It was very, very entertaining. Katie and I went together. It was very good. And it was, with the BMS rock band in between kind of the acts, with you can see Mr. Depper, who's been here before, helping the rock band play Guns N' Roses theme songs. So it was it was very entertaining. So, but it's the enthusiasm will lead to a very strong feeder program for the theater program here at Morse. Woolwich tomorrow, I didn't get a chance to check at this, but we have a very popular Go-To Science program, which is live virtually. But Beth and Curtis from Go-To Science, I think we're going to be here live tomorrow to do presentations with our K2 classes at Woolwich. And so I'm sure the students are excited for that. 8th graders at Woolwich are gearing up for their annual DC trip. Here at Morse, and I hope I get this name right, but Junior, is it Kai Nascimento? Does that sound right? Earned a spot to attend the National Flight Academy for a program this summer for students that are interested in pursuing a career in aviation.
That's awesome.
Spring concert occurred last week with just great performances. And AP exams you mentioned, Aurora, but we had 119 students take 230 exams in 17 different subjects. It was impressive. And I would like to thank Amber McGowan, who monitors all of those and takes our students down to our central office, to our conference room, and organizes that. And the students do a great job. A couple things coming up if anybody has an interest, but Bath Tech graduation is May 23rd at noon. Adult ed graduation, these are all on your program too, but adult education graduation is May 29th at 4 p.m. at the Orion, which is the theater at Mount Ararat Middle School. May 30th, we've got a trifecta. We've got Unified Literacy, Poetry, Art Gala. We got JMG closing ceremony that evening. And then we have National Technical Honor Society at Bath Tech during the day. And lastly, well, not lastly, graduation probably is the last big thing, but May 31st, Bath Middle School celebration of learning from 10 to 1. You can stop in at any point and just kind of go into the gym and see what the students they'll present to you. It's quite a nice event that they put on. And that's it. Oh, and one last thing, just maybe more for the board, but is that May 28th, next Tuesday, we have our district budget meeting, and we will get you the kind of script. We'll get that to you maybe tomorrow, so you can have that if you have any questions about. It's going to be in the auditorium. Yeah, it'll be in the auditorium, and we'll get reminders out. We sent you the budget link today for the booklet and all the documents, and we'll get that out to, I think we already got it out to staff, but we'll put reminders out in a newsletter about just encouraging people to come and be part of the process.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Patrick?
Can I give a plug? I didn't give this to you, but there is at the Maine Maritime Museum, there's an exhibit up about the Woolwich boat building program that's been going on for 15 years, a collaboration between Woolwich Central School and Maine Maritime Museum. So there's an exhibit up on the last 15 years of the program with some interviews
cool.
with students, audio and video interviews with Natalie Emerson, actually was in a video that is up there now. So that'll be up for about 6 weeks if anybody wants to check it out.
Excellent.
And Kurt, do you have a date for the launch of the boats or not yet? Still working on it?
Yeah, for Woolwich, it's Thursday, June 13th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
In the Quonset.
All right. Deb,
Right.
Bay.
Tonight we're looking at the month of April. So, Caroline, I know you're excited to hear this last financial report, right? So we've spent $31 million out of our $41 million budget. It's about 75%. So we spent a little bit less than last year. Last year we had spent 78% at this time, but basically it's just a easy way to monitor that we're on track. For the most part, expenses are within budget. There are some lines, obviously that are up and others that are down, but overall, I think that the administrators and their administrative assistants do a good job keeping an eye on their own budgets. As far as revenue, we're at almost 35 million, which is 86%. So it's a little bit higher than last year. So that's a good thing. So we're bringing in a little bit more, or showing a little bit more revenue at this time of year. And as far as the ARP funds, we have about 318,000 left at the end of April. So we'll be pretty much winding down with that after the amphitheater and the final air conditioning payment in Woolwich. So that's it. Everything is, I think, is going as well as we planned and what we had hoped for. A lot of activity in payroll this time of year. A lot of anthem rates did go up, almost 10%.
It's a lot.
But we have, we have this is the time of year where we have open enrollment and lump sum requests, and so it's busy in the office.
A lot of moving factors.
Right. So, questions?
Any questions for Deb? Jennifer?
You just mentioned the amphitheater out of the ARP money.
Right.
Was that the BMS theater improvements that you just talked about, Patrick, or is that?
No, the
No,
BMS
that's
one
the-
was from the Rev grant.
Yes.
This one is at Morse. It's an outside
Outside.
classroom kind of amphitheater.
Oh, okay.
Greek style.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Deb. Appreciate it. All right. So now we're going to go to 11.1, and Katie's she passed out a lot of information. We're going to go over all of this and have some discussions about it. And we'll see where everybody's at. We do not, we don't have to vote on anything tonight, if you know. So, I mean, it's really make sure everyone's clear that we're all on the same page with the information she's given us. I just want to thank Katie for all her hard work on this and for everyone who worked with her, because this is really great stuff. Just the way you pulled it together, really well organized, and made it very easy to see where we are with things. So I wanted to thank you for that. And so go ahead and take it away, and we'll have a good
Sure.
discussion.
And we are required every year, just before we get into the PowerPoint, to go over the title funds and just to remind the board how we spend them. So, because this is a quick conversation, I'm just going to do this first before we get into the deeper things. You see that you have a white sheet with a chart. Across the top, you have our Title I, Title II, and Title IV funds. You can see over the years from FY22 to what we're expecting for next year. This change is a direct result of the change in the way free and reduced lunch numbers are collected. So the state had us move to counting on the direct certification numbers. So we finally have what that impact will be for next year. You can see that Title I went up by about 1,600. Unfortunately, Title II went down by about 19,000. And Title IV went down by about 6,500. So what does this mean? Our Title IV funds, we always lump into our Title I funds, so we consider it really just Title I and Title II. For Title I, you can see on the list, we pay for our interventionists at Fisher Mitchell and Dyke Newell. We have parent funds and homeless transportation funds that we're required to reserve. And that takes up the most of the money. For Title II, we always pay for one teacher out of that to reduce class sizes. So we'll do that again. What will be hit with the decrease of the 19,000 is professional development money. So usually Title II is a person and then PD money. And so I will just draw from what we have locally, just means we'll be doing less. So we're not worried about any personnel at this point, which is good news. Any questions about that? Okay, thank you. All right, so as Lou said, I just want to be clear that this is the start of a conversation. I gave the board a lot of homework on that document with all the live links. It had a lot of articles, both on school start time and the research around that, and on cell phone use and the research around that, as well as all the different community members who were able to join the conversation for start time. And then cell phones was really an administrator committee that started that conversation. And so in thinking of how to do this, I didn't want to just regurgitate everything you read. And so I'm just going to highlight some things, but I think it's good to note for the record that the board did a tremendous amount of deeper reading and research. So this is just really a reminder of some of the key points for tonight. So we're going to start. I mean, Melissa's presentation on MIHAS was the perfect, I think, introduction to this conversation. The reason why both start time and cell phones have come up as priority discussions and possible changes is because of we're continuing to look for ways to improve our mental health for our students, especially our teenagers. And a lot of states, California, Florida are two of them, have actually moved statewide to require that their high schools start at 8:30 a.m. or later because of these effects that are positive that they've seen from doing that. So improved safety, better attendance, better achievement, more rest for students is the reason why these things are happening. And I think the biggest one is a pretty phenomenal amount of research around reduced depression and anxiety just from sleeping more. So again, you've done a lot more reading on this, but this is just a quick hit of what this sleep conversation is about. You can go ahead. In this, while this might be a new conversation for us, we've actually been having this conversation since before the pandemic with a school board committee that was started that Lou and I have been running basically since then. In addition to what we've been doing, you can see here that there are lots of major scientific and medical organizations and also educational organizations who promote this initiative to start school for older students at 8:30 or later. And so I just wanted to remind the board of this. I think one of the biggest points, and I have this on this slide and another one that we should talk about, is that second bullet point there. Studies have shown that adolescents have a natural shift in their sleep-wake cycles, resulting in later bedtimes and waking times, making it difficult for them to function optimally with early school start times. So a lot of the, when we were doing all this research, Lou and I had a very hard time finding any research that opposed what was found to be positive because we wanted it to be really balanced. And this bullet point is one of the reasons why there isn't much out there, even though you can move to the next slide, Jake. Even though a lot of these arguments for why people are opposed to changing start time come up, there is research that shows that on the bottom chart, you can see the start times are along the top. And this was a study done, I believe, on over 1,000 students. Yes, over 1,000 students. That the later the start time, at the bottom, you can see the amount of sleep that happens, and the sample sizes from there go from 300 to about 1,500, showing that regardless of when students choose to go to sleep, the later you start school, the more hours of sleep they get. Meaning, if you look at the quote above that, I think this is worth reading. Although many people seem to think otherwise, teenagers are still children and growing ones at that. They are not adults, and their growing brains and bodies need an average of 8.5 to 9.25 hours of sleep per night. Many teens simply cannot fall asleep before 11 p.m. due to shifted circadian rhythms or body clocks. Yes, poor planning, electronic and other distractions, and poor parenting can certainly contribute to the problem, but the fact that these circadian rhythm shifts appear in adolescent mammals as well as adolescent humans suggests that there's more to the story here than irresponsibility. So I just wanted everyone to see that, a lot of these arguments in opposition are really tricky ones. This would not be an easy switch that the board would need to decide on. However, the research is pretty bulletproof. Okay, so what are we actually talking about in changes? Over time, this is what the committee came up with. Our current schedule's on the left, and then the 3 options that we would be considering are the next 3 columns. I want to note that these are just draft possibilities because first student really can't take all the time to run all the bus runs unless we choose to do this because it's a tremendous amount of work. And so the amount of time here between when the younger students would start earlier and when the older students would start later, we are guessing is around 40 minutes. They did say, and this is something to consider, it might have to be longer. And so these might have to be even later. They also wanted me to share that they hope it could be done with the amount of buses they have, but the shorter amount of time we put between start times, the more likely it is we might need to add more buses. And so if the board were to ask me, will this cost more money? My answer is it might. If you don't want it to, you would probably have to make sure there's an even wider amount of time or a larger amount of time between when the younger students start and the older students start. That makes sense. Okay, can move along. So what did our community think? You have 3 very large colored packets that are the survey results. For the sake of the trees, I didn't print all the comments because there are pages and pages of them, but on your homework page, you can actually digitally link to see all the results for everything and everybody's comments. I will say we had amazing numbers and feedback in terms of feedback. We had 307 students. Thank you, by the way. So I emailed these 2 and said, I've only had 2 students reply, help me. And so this is what they were able to do. I think I've just picked a few things to highlight. So you really want to dig into this before we talk about it more at our next board meeting. But you can see that on weekdays, the average students getting up between 5:30 and 6:30 was sort of the highest number. And then on the weekends, you can see that those times are obviously different, like many of us. So between 8 and 9 was 33%, and after 9 o'clock was 32% on weekends. And so the reason for the committee wanted to ask those questions, because it sort of shows what people's more natural sleep patterns are when they don't have an alarm clock waking them up. 70% of students feel tired when they wake up or during the school day, and 73% of students felt school starting later would impact life after school, even with schedule adjustments. So herein lies the tricky part of all of this. While I spoke with our athletic director and many other organizations like the Y for childcare, the amount of logistical lift to make something like this happen is tremendous. And the students, I should say, are actually recognizing this because if they get out later and all the other schools around them do not, while our athletic director and our club, the people who run our clubs and other things can shift things, it will mean that school time will be missed for students on a rotating basis if they have to leave early to get to meets, competitions, and that sort of thing. The students you can see 56% of them do not support a schedule that starts at 8:30 or later. So the students, and I was talking to Aurora on the way in, would prefer that the schedule stay as is, even though they recognize that starting later might actually be good for them, many of them. And I think one of their data perfectly shows what the issue is. They know it would be good for them, and they know they would probably appreciate it, but they know it would cause so many logistical problems that they still would prefer our current model. Does that seem accurate in terms of what people have been talking about? That's what I thought. Okay. All right. So 461 families answered, and I asked the question who had just K-5 versus 6 through 12, and said answer for your oldest student, and just pick one student so we could break up the data. You can actually see on your document, your Google Doc now, I disaggregated the data by K-5 versus 6 through 12. If you want to look at the separate responses, I put graphs all the way on the bottom there. But you can see that obviously the bedtimes range depending on the age. And we have, anywhere from 9 to 11 being the times when, as research shows, students at this age are usually falling asleep, based on what their parents think. Close to half of the parents or more believe that their child's mental health and sleep are not negatively impacted by the school schedule. And then you can see the two graphs I highlighted below. Do you support a schedule change? 63% said yes, yet over here, choose your ideal school schedule, and the largest percent is actually the current schedule. If the board moves to look more closely at possibly changing it, we would need to break that second graph down into K-5 versus 6 through 12, because it's kind of tricky in terms of how people responded. If you look on that document I just mentioned, that's there already. All right, next. This is another look into K-5 versus 6 through 12. And I think if I were to summarize all of this, it would be that the majority of families do not support this shift either, similar to the students. While many of them would answer that they agree it would be helpful, all the things that would get in the way make them prefer our current schedule. Can move along. This is what our staff think. The majority of staff support keeping the school schedules as they are as well. And so when you look at those more carefully, you can really see that they do see students looking tired often, and they do worry about students' mental health. That's the one on the bottom right, where 56% of staff who answer this said they worry about students' mental health more than once a day. And so it's very disparate in terms of both ends of the spectrum of what people think. There's very few people who seem to fall in the middle. And again, I don't want to sugarcoat any of this. This would be a pretty tricky decision for the board to make as a singular district in an area where nobody else is choosing to do this. So, all right. Here I just quickly laid out what the benefits were, and obviously the benefits are enormous, which is why this conversation is so difficult. Decrease in substance use, decrease in depression and anxiety, increase in attendance. And then the challenges, though, are very, very real. Sports, busing, childcare, and being the solo school in the area doing this and having to figure out what that would mean. Okay, so next, before we move on to cell phones, should we take some questions on this and then do cell phones next?
Yeah, that
Okay,
makes sense.
great.
So questions, Jamie has one.
Yeah, of course. Have any of the neighboring districts indicated that they are looking at this at all?
I went and presented at a meeting with Dr. Manuel with Freeport, 75, and Brunswick. We are farthest along. They were still deciding whether they were either going to look into it or not and wanted to know what we had done. So far of all of those places, I haven't heard of any of them picking up the topic. And to be honest, there was a lot of very wide eyes because it has been a project that's been taking place over years. And so it's a lot. So if I had to guess, maybe one of them wouldn't talk about it next year if we were lucky.
And then the only other comment that I have, I was going to take the survey as a parent of a second grader.
Mm-hmm.
But after like the first couple of questions, it asked, do you believe your child's mental health and sleep are negatively impacted or something like that? and no, because they're in second grade.
Right.
But if I were to answer that for my high schoolers a year or two ago, 100%.
Right.
And so I don't know if there's a way for us to revisit that at some point. And
If you look on the document I added today, you can see it's an Excel document where I downloaded all the survey results and then sorted them by K to 5 parents versus 6 through 12 parents, and then made some more of these graphs. So you can actually see the difference, because for that very reason. And I also didn't want to make the survey so long or complicated. Like, if you're this person, fill out this one. And if you're, so it's not perfect data. And, one thing the board could decide is we need more information from people. Okay, other schedule questions,
Any other?
comments?
Jennifer, do you have one?
Well, I just been thinking a lot about the sleep issue and about, change. This is one way of trying to be better
Mhm.
rested. And it just occurred to me, I forgot to ask, I wanted to before the MIHA study, but is caffeine considered a drug when the survey for MIHAS when they ask about caffeine? And then I was wondering, when it comes to the sleep stuff, if we ever ask like how much caffeine is consumed, after 12, after noon, after 2, after 3, like just, and I'm not saying that that's the solution to this at all, but I started thinking about those sleep patterns and difficulty getting up in the morning and how much caffeine is consumed. And
Yeah.
I don't know, does that ever come up at all?
It's a good question. I honestly can't remember if it's asked. So you two, having taken the MIHAS, remember of caffeine? I don't think it is, right? Okay. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, I think I agree. We've been talking about this, you and I, for a long time. I think it's coming down to, it's such a huge, like if all the surveys had come up, well, we really want this, that's one thing. Because that's not what it's coming up with. I think this is extremely valuable. I think you did the homework for the other districts. They could see what was going on. I think we should continue to push with our representatives and our state senators on a state level, because I really think that the only way this really shifts is if everybody's doing it. So if everybody's doing it, it's a whole culture shift for the state. And yes, it would still not be easy, but it's, I think, next to impossible to pull off solely by ourselves when you aren't even sure if we got half the people saying you want to do it. I mean, this is excellent work, and I absolutely agree that the science is clear, but just the logistics of it, I'm willing to continue to talk about it. I don't think we should let it go in terms of just like, we'll never talk about it again. But I really think being advocates for the state needs to look at this, because if that happened, that makes a lot more sense, because, then you're not competing with, high schools aren't competing with sports, jobs, everything else, because Brunswick's getting out earlier. If everybody's doing it later, then it's something more to look at with the state. Aurora, do you have something to say?
Well, I agree that it would be a lot easier on the state level. I think among the students, the main concern was just the fact they were getting out later individually, because like sports go late. I know like a lot of the swimmers, they go from like 6:30 to 8 p.m. And if we shift that later, they're going to be swimming until 9 p.m. And even though we're starting later, we're going to have the same volume of homework, just with less time to do it after school. And so although we might still be going to bed at 11, the hour before 11, instead of being spent relaxing or kind of recovering from the day, is going to be spent finishing that homework. And so just considering that, I guess, even on a single school level rather than.
No, it's a big,
great
that's very well said. And that is a huge concern. And that's why, like I said, with doing it solely, why we shouldn't have to be the ones that are taking carrying that weight. But you're right. Even if everybody did it, that is a huge factor. And then there is the other factor, because like you said, Florida and California have done this. They also have more light than we do in general.
They do.
And so that is a real thing. And as long as we're in Eastern and not Atlantic time zone, that's going to, it gets dark here early. That's a factor. So things going even later, you lose any light that's happening at certain times of the year. And that's also a real thing in terms of mental health and all of that. So, I mean, there's more looking at it. I think, we can continue certainly to have this in the forefront, discussing what it means to get more sleep and all those things. And like Jennifer bringing up caffeine and other things. No, I mean, there's all these factors, but you know, it really is light. How much light there is in Maine is a factor as well. But no, I'm not proposing anything. I'm not getting involved with that. The state, that's right. Yeah, we'll do it just in Saginaw County, sure. No, I think I just think there's a lot of these factors, and this really highlights it. And this is a very meaningful and I think necessary discussion. And it's great to hear from the students on what everybody's thinking, because it's all that would have to be taken into account. So anyway, that's just where I'm coming from. But.
And I would say I'm really proud that our district took this on as a research project, because I think, you know, I wish it would be easier to move towards this step because the research is so strong. But I also know we've changed so many things to try to improve mental health over the past few years. And I know once those get a little more traction, you know, we are doing a lot. And so, you know, I would definitely support keeping all of this data and coming back to this, you know, in a future year if other people start to do it or the state changes their mind on the resolution they were considering, which looks like they just want local control to be the way that this goes. So I guess my question for you then is, should we discuss this again at the next board meeting, or should we decide? I've heard from it sounds like a few people are okay not.
What do you all think? Yes, Anita.
I'm okay with not moving forward with changing the times. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
We're talking about
I
it.
really feel like the conversation shouldn't end as far as addressing the overall health ramifications, physically and mentally. What are some other things? You know, we should continue the conversation around what are some things as a district, as a community that we can do to support our kids to have healthy sleep hygiene, to balance school and sports and their health better, to be better educated and to, I think we need to continue that conversation and look at other ways besides changing a school schedule that we could help with that, not just drop it and walk away.
That's actually I agree with you. And I think maybe one thing I can do for my board presentation next time is put together a list of all the changes we've made since the pandemic began. Because like any change, it takes time to see its impact. And, you know, you're making me even think of the LEADS substance use program that we've just piloted in 6th grade that next year will now be in 2nd, 4th, and 6th. Like that will impact mental health, because substance use impacts mental health. So there are a lot of things that we're doing to help this issue. So this doesn't need to be the only answer that we look at. I think we can continue digging for things that might be logistically more tenable.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that would be great to do if you could do that for next time.
Sure.
But I don't, unless it's someone else says, I don't think we need to specifically address this in this format next time. I think people are right. Is that, am I reading you all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be nice for us to keep the dialogue open with neighboring districts. And I'm looking at you to, you know, just keep it as part of the conversation, because it is something, you know, if I could wave a magic wand, only because I spend so much time with Dr. Hagler and hearing, you know, the benefits, like I wish we could do it, but I truly recognize, especially Aurora sharing that, you know, that's really insightful. So
yeah, because that would mean other changes on the level of homework and all the things that we expect of the students that would have to shift as well. So it's a real culture shift.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. Yeah, Jennifer.
And also, if we're not going to do this, is there any kind of programming that we can do internally to change what we do at the beginning of a day? I mean, would that matter at all in terms of waiting until those rhythms and those energy levels get up to a certain point. I mean, we've talked about how it's not great to have math early first thing in the morning for every single day. I mean, like, I don't know if there's any more research or any other kind of programming we could do that would help even being here, but what they're doing. I don't know.
Sleep pods. Sleep pods in the library. Yeah. No, that kind of
it's
stuff
a good
makes sense.
question,
It
and
is.
our principals, especially at the elementary and middle school levels, where they have more sort of say in how the schedules work themselves out, have worked with putting study halls first or other things so students can ease into the day. And it's always, to be honest, it's always mixed results. Some people feel like the students are freshest in the morning at the younger grades, and and even at the middle school, and that's when you have your best teaching going on. So I think it's tricky to give one answer to that question, but it's a good one to ask.
Okay. Great. We all ready to move on to cell phone policy?
So we'll put a pin in this, but keep thinking about it.
Exactly.
All right, great.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about cell phones, which I know Aurora already got stressed out about on her way in, because you will see that the student results, not surprisingly, are very different than the family and staff results of the survey here. So we're going to actually do the opposite this time and start with the benefits challenges, because I thought it was easier for this one because it's pretty, again, straightforward. So there's strong research coming out that the amount of screen time and time on social media is one of the, if not the main reason that mental health for teenagers has decreased since the start of cell phones. So, banning cell phones would obviously increase mental health, increase in-person social connections, and reduce digital bullying, which we know is a big problem, decrease depression and anxiety, increase academic achievement. There's also a lot of research that shows that when you take cell phones fully away during the school day, students use them less outside of the school day because they have chosen to get involved in more things. And so there's not as much of a need to use them to fill in their social time. A decrease in the I wasn't sure what to call this mentality, which impacts well-being. So all the people you see with the perfect lives on social media and comparing yourselves to them, the way they look, what they have, what they do, is extremely detrimental to everyone's well-being. And so obviously that time would be reduced. The challenge is people are addicted to it, very much so, and rely on it. And it can be used for educational purposes. I know that families, in terms of safety, worry about being able to connect with their students. I hope the board read the 2 letters from the Bath Police Chief and the Sheriff that they actually mentioned that cell phones reduce the safety in a crisis, like a school shooting, because phones make noises when you need to be silent. People could be texting and panicking others and having them come to a scene when the police actually need more space. And so, I think that was all surprising to me when I started doing this, because I was thinking of my own child and wanting to be able to connect with him. But now knowing that, it's interesting to think of the other side. Okay, I think we can move on, Jake. Okay, so why just restricting doesn't work? So this is really interesting. There was the reason why I included this quote and this reference to this study is that a lot of people say, well, we just won't let students have the phones out. They'll be in their pockets or in their backpack, or we'll have them, put them somewhere where they're not allowed to look at them. But the addiction is so powerful that if it is on you, if it's upside down on your desk, if it's in your backpack, you are less likely to be able to think clearly, focus, and they tested, put your phone on your desk, leave it in your pocket of your bag, leave it out in another room. None of these conditions involve active phone use, just the potential distraction. The results were clear. The closer the phone was to the students' awareness, the worse they performed on tests in this study. Even just having a phone in their pocket sapped students' abilities. Because they're often thinking about what they're missing, who's talking with whom. I see some smiles over here. And actually, after reading this, I have started not putting my phone out on tables during meetings. And it is kind of amazing. And I don't even have social media. Okay, let's move along. It is. This doesn't count. Yeah, if in a ban, it would be watches as well. Yeah. Okay, so here are some terrifying statistics. So you have the teenager's age, the percentage spending at least 4 hours per day on their cell phones, and then the average hours per day people are using their phones. You can see that every single one of these numbers, and this was a Gallup poll, so very credible. Students are spending at least 4 hours on their phone. Girls spend more than boys. The purple is average hours per day. So 4.8 is the average of all teenagers. 17-year-old spend 5.8 hours per day on their phones, according to this. Because all the minutes add up. I don't know about you, but I'm always shocked by my screen time amount that it sends me. I do read books on my phone, though, so that counts. Okay. All right. So the students do not want to give up their phones. They think that they spend less than 30 minutes on their phones. And their main reason for using their cell phones is to text their friends and to use it for school assignments. All right, so we can keep moving along. Staff, on the other hand, it says, from your observations, how often do you think your students use their cell phones during school? 37% said they work for younger students. So I took that data out. So of the ones who work with older students, which is what we wanted to pay attention to, we have numbers in the 40s at least of people who are using, it's most of the highest percentages in the students at school use their phone more than 2 hours a day. That's from staff. What do you think your students primarily use their cell phones for during the school day? 36% said that it's checking social media during class. Okay, we can go on. Again, more staff results, because I think it's different when people are being, and I don't mean to disparage the students' results at all. I think it's very hard for all of us to be self-reflective. I find it interesting how different the student results are to the staff who are actually watching the students do the behaviors. So the staff feel that cell phones distract from the learning environment. Very high percentage in the red there. Do you believe cell phones should be allowed in school based on your observations? 62% no, they are too distracting. How often do you observe students getting distracted by their cell phones? The largest percents there are 5 or more times per class. And let's see, the orange, which is 3 to 4 times. How do you think the use of cell phones during school hours impacts social interactions? A large majority, it hinders face-to-face interaction, which we all know. Okay. In terms of parents, I would say the parent results were almost identical to the staff results, maybe slightly lower in terms of being more cell phone positive. But they were leaning more towards restrictions on phones, not totally taking phones away, which is different. However, do you think the use of cell phones during school hours impacts social interactions? 70% said yes. Do you believe cell phones should be allowed in school? Of that one where yes, but with restrictions is in the 50s, the no is still 35. Okay, we can move along. So a little background on this, and I know that you all read this in the notes, but just for the sake of this public presentation, it was an administrative team of assistant principals, deans of students, myself, technology director, and our SRO who came together to do this initial research because of the amount of problems that we're all seeing related to cell phone use, related to interpersonal relationships, related to bullying. And so after doing all this research ourselves, we unanimously wanted to move forward to have the school board determine whether we could fully ban cell phones in grades 6 through 12. What that would look like here, and there are lots of schools, I'm sure you've read in the articles I posted, who've done this already successfully, and their results are fairly amazing. Obviously, there's growing pains. But there are many ways to do this. Cell phone lockers, I won't go through all the things we researched. This is the most popular way. It's also, while expensive, $36,000, which we have already set aside in ARP for mental health technology. So we could pay for this in June, so it would not be a local cost. Essentially, it's magnets on the wall. Every student has their own pouch. They would put their cell phone in it. It doesn't work, which also means I have to look more into the watches, but I'm pretty sure I know with my phone, if my phone is disabled, my watch only tells me the time. It doesn't send me like text messages and things. I see some shaking heads of the younger people. That's good. Okay. Probably accurate then. Okay. So the thought would be that the pouches, the magnets at the front doors, everybody keeps their own pouch for their entire, obviously some will be lost, and it's like our computer and computer case policy with replacements. But we would just buy a new set, which is around $4K if I base it on a 125 student class every year locally, which would just give the sixth graders new pouches. And so that's sort of the money and the systems. I don't want to bore you with the details of the policies and procedures that we've already looked into. I know that you guys have access to that, but at all of our schools where this would be the case, they've actually written the procedures already to make sure they could actually make it work, and they can. Oh, that's it. Okay, so now questions about this.
Right. So again, it's the parents are more for it. The kids are not.
staff,
So
yes.
before we ask questions, I want to ask Aurora and Caroline, and ask Aurora if she's been talking to my son Eric, because he feels very much like you do. Yeah, he's ready. He's like, no, you can't do this. So I just want to hear what you're all thinking, and then we can ask some other questions.
Were you giggling at your survey results? Is that what you were
No,
laughing
we were
at?
laughing because it said we use it over 2 hours a day at school, which I think might be physically impossible to do. Like you look at my screen time, it's like 3 minutes in this class, 2 minutes in this class, maybe 30 minutes in study hall, and then done. No, I think for starters, I think limiting phone usage might, although it may increase face-to-face interaction, I think it might also increase like the separation between like CP kids and AP kids, because I have friends that are in CP classes that I never see, but I can text them. So that kind of maintains the friendship, or otherwise wouldn't be able to maintain it. And it's going to sound kind of bad and might actually convince you guys more to ban cell phones, but there are some classes that are just boring. And if you don't have a phone on you, then you're just going to fall asleep and leave. So like it's a spark of hope, even if it's just 2 seconds. And I know there's classes that I've done poorly in because they're so easy. I just like get bored, and phones help, I guess, balance that out a little bit.
That's not really a great answer, though, to that problem.
I know.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think a lot of the older generation does exaggerate the extent to which children use their phone because it's so much more than they use their phone. So by comparison, they assume the numbers are a lot higher than they are, especially in school hours.
I think you need to read all the articles I assigned to look more at the research.
Yeah, well, it'd be terrible to say that this doesn't affect me, but because I know I have younger siblings and just people, this obviously phones are huge. But I think that the classes that I'm in, I kind of travel with like an amoeba of students that are pretty motivated in a classroom and don't typically go on their phones. I know that's definitely different. I know every classroom isn't like that. But Mr. Foster had a great kind of fear tactic. He would say that you had like so many strikes, and if you lost all your strikes of like having a phone out in class, like if he saw your phone, you would get a strike and would be sent somewhere. And that terrified me. So I would never touch my phone in that class, and it definitely helped me focus, which I thought was good. I think also the idea of having the phone in the pouch but letting the student keep the phone on them is smart, because again, like you said, like if you just completely take it away from them, it's pretty likely that they could freak out. But yes, again, it could also distract you. So I don't know. I mean, of course it's not gonna go one way with the positives and the negatives, but yeah, that's my input.
All right, thanks for the input. Now you have questions, Jamie, or comments?
Would this also apply to educators in the classroom?
Part of the procedures would be what cell phone use would look like for adults as models. I don't think we would, just because we have, some of our emergency things need to happen on people's cell phones. We wouldn't want them to be demagnetized. But yeah, it's absolutely something we would put in writing for grownups too.
And in part of my research at birthday parties over the past weekend, talking with parents, something that was brought up to me that I never even considered was what's being done at the elementary school age when maybe a fourth or fifth grader is bringing a phone to school and showing inappropriate things to third graders. And what is our, I guess, safety net with elementary schools?
We do have different procedures in the elementary schools to address that. But because it's so few and far between, at least at this point, and also you're with one group of students all day long, and it's a little bit of a different scenario. So we could definitely tighten those up, but the administrators didn't feel like they also, if we moved in this direction, would need a pouch for, let's say, fifth graders.
Kind of just to second what Caroline said about Mr. Foster's classroom. He has that, I'm in his class this year, and he has like a thing on the wall to put your phone in when you walk in. And technically putting your phone there is optional, but it's kind of, he has the 3-strike system, and pretty much everyone puts their phone there entirely by choice, just to not risk the detention. And also, I know this is a very isolated incident, but I do remember a time where my friend was on a phone call in class, and the teacher was like, "Hey, what you doing?" And then my friend looked up with tears in her eyes. I was like, "Yeah, my dog just died." So there is that aspect of emergencies.
Well, emergency. And so I guess the thing is, if you read the articles, and I know it's hard for you to comprehend it because you've grown up in a world that only has cell phones. But for those of us who are old like me and have grown up in a world that did not have cell phones, that's what the office is for. So when there are emergencies, you call the office, and it's going through, which is the right way to do it. You go through the adults in the office who then can call the kid down to the office, It's much better than someone who's randomly, without knowing, gets a call from the parent saying, your dog just died, which is, however that happened. But so I don't think that's really an excuse to have the phone, because that's why you have phones in the classroom or in the office. And it's just the way you get things done. You need to pick up your kid early. You call the office and say, please call whoever down, I'm picking up my kid. I think from what reading these articles and stuff is the big thing that I'm really impressed with is in these schools, once they established it. So it's like Mr. Foster's class all day long, really. And you don't have it at lunch, because then you're actually engaged with other people at lunch. There's no one, because in the schools, it said in the schools that it was only, everyone can have it at lunch. Everybody, because they didn't have it all day, is like this. And that's not good either. So that kind of intermittent thing doesn't really work. If you're going to ban it, I think it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, because in the end, believe it or not, I think the kids would be less stressed, because you're not missing anything, because no one else is on it in your school. And if there's really an emergency, that's what the office is for. Teachers will help make sure you get in touch with your parents if you need to. But I think that's where a lot of the research is going, showing that while you're like detoxing, yes, you have to detox. But once you do, I think if you talk to students who are in those schools now, most of them would probably be like, yeah, it's great. But go ahead.
I think it's also important to like how you brought up the office and things, like even when I was in mostly at like elementary and middle school, but like I was still getting called down to the office for kind of stuff like that. Like and I'm sure a lot of my other classmates can say this too. And that we would have to ask to call down to the office to go like phone our parents or something. Like I think the kids in my grade and my age and like people older than me were kind of the last of the children that had to go down to the office to ask to contact our parents. And I think as like younger kids are coming in that are born after the phone was like invented, like they never had that at all growing up. So I agree. Like, I think it's definitely important that like as my age and a few years younger and a few years older now that we're all clearing out of high school, sort of like it's a whole fresh set of kids that have an entirely different childhood of like less going outside, doing other things. So yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
like with my two kids, it's the same way that
yeah.
Isaac, they're 4-year difference. And what Isaac experienced is very different than what Eric experienced. And so it's the same with you and your younger siblings. It's that very, it is very different, but that's also why this is so important to have this discussion, because they should experience a period where they have to know that's not how it always has to be done all the time. And so anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Could I make a motion to extend the
Thank you.
meeting
Yes.
time beyond the
Thank
2
you.
hours?
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I was just thinking about how our front offices have changed. And so one of the things
That
that
would
would
be
be
an
interesting is that would there be staffing and bandwidth in our front offices if all of a sudden they had to handle a lot more of this traffic, and finding out, the things that we've kind of forgotten about when, at a time when we didn't do this as much. So that was one question. And then I think the other question was, how different is the cell phone use versus the other device use? If the screen time is screen time no matter where you are, does taking away a cell phone dramatically decrease when when you're on your tablet or your watch or your computer and using the same kinds of resources, social media, whatever else? So I was like, I wonder how those things are separated.
That chart with the screen, those 4 to 5 hours, was any kind of screen.
Okay.
And then here in school, what would be left in terms of a screen, should this happen, would be the computers, which block, and catch up as more things are unblocked, and then they need to be added in, because it's really hard to block everything all at once. And I think some teachers use the computers a lot, some don't. So that would vary.
Did you have a?
So would you ban personal computers too? Like I have a MacBook I use for school. Would that fall under it? Because I can go on those blocked websites on that computer.
That would be a tech question. I would
Okay.
need to, I mean, we'd have to look deeper into that. Yes.
Yeah, that would be, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Because this is obviously a discussion that's going to have to continue beyond tonight.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, we don't have to exhaust all the questions tonight because we have other things we still have to do, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just ask a technical question. So the phone is banned it's in the pouch for the entire school day.
Mhm. So you put it in on the way in the door and you press it against a magnet and it locks it. You carry it around in your bag. You can't get it open. And then the magnets are uncovered again for when people are leaving the building, or there's one at the front office if people get dismissed early.
That's way better than what I thought.
Yeah.
As the self-proclaimed youngest member of the school board, I could not be any more in favor of this policy at this moment. So thank you for that presentation.
Mhm.
And so we aren't taking a motion on
We
that.
don't have to unless the board wants to. I mean, there's
So in terms of the timeline,
We'd have
you
to
you
probably
can
do-
choose to talk about it again. The one thing that's tricky here is the ARP money needs to be spent by the end of this year. And so that's a little bit of the
meaning
putting
June, right?
pressure on the time to make a decision. We would be able to, if you voted at the next meeting, we would be able to make the purchase still.
Well, yeah, and I guess the question would be if we were to vote tonight or next month, I mean, what's the actual motion? And would it fall, and you would, if you're doing it, then it would be for the fall.
We'll have to defer to Patrick with what the motion would be. I'm not sure I know enough about.
So we
Is
may-
it just the wording?
Let's not make it that complicated. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, you would vote to ban, student cell phones, or not ban, I guess. Yeah, we can come up with something, lock them up into the pouch system.
Yeah, no, the board,
Beginning in the
yeah,
fall.
yeah. For 6 through 12.
Right.
Use the yonder pouches
We
for
can have-
phone access, 6 through 12.
Okay, Aurora's not giving up. What is Aurora?
Oh no, I just have one more question for like senior opens. When you leave for senior opens, could you have your phone?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
would,
once you
once you
walk out of
leave
the
the building, and for sports, it would be the same access as you have now, because
Yeah.
you're not, I mean, you're basketball, you're in here, but you know what I mean. Sports, we would have be the same rules as it is now, because it's after school.
Yeah, you're not going to take away. It's really that
Just-
while it's during the academic time, you're focused
So
on
7:40
your
to
studies, each
2:05.
other, you don't have the distraction. And what we're seeing in all the research is that not having that distraction makes a world of difference. You may not see it because you're immersed in it, but that's what everybody's seeing, and that's why you would want to do it. It's not punishing anybody.
I guess I would wonder about, and hopefully it's a short amount of time, but would this cause anxiety? And how would, because we're using mental health money to fund this, right?
Mhm.
So I guess my question is that because we've kind of allocated the money before we've voted on how to spend it, which is kind of backwards a little bit in my head. I'm just trying to
Well, we just, in the way the ARP grant's written, we can put lump sums under
right.
titles. So this is just the technology. These are technology funds. We never specifically wrote they were for this.
Okay.
But all of our projects that are in ARP have to be related to learning loss or mental health improvement, because that's how we wrote our grant. So
Gotcha.
this
Okay.
would be approvable
Okay. Thank
with
you.
what we wrote, but it's not specifically stated that this is what we will be purchasing.
It's not locked in. but it's
So
Right.
how,
showing we could
And I think in terms of, will this cause anxiety? Yes, at first, because it's the growing pains. But if you look at the research, after people get used to the rhythm of what it's like to magnetize and demagnetize, and I'm really not missing out because nobody can do it, then when you read all the studies that are done of places that have done it, it eventually becomes normalized like anything.
I would just hope that if we pass something tonight, that we would have how we're going to implement this, a very clear policy going into the school next, doing it and then practicing it and helping with that anxiety of not having that thing that gives you a feeling of safety, even though it's false or not. I don't know. Jamie, how would you, I think they would have.
I think you,
We have all the procedures
I was going
written.
to say, okay.
So I guess the question is though, in full transparency though, does it make sense to, I know we did the survey, I know people know about this, but does it make sense to bring the policy, this is how it will work and show all that at the next meeting and then vote on it? Or are you all, I'm asking.
You know where I am.
I mean,
No,
I think it's
I
the
understand
difference
that.
between a policy that makes the overarching decision
Mhm.
and then the
then bring the
things that our
details.
principals
Okay.
do every day, which
Okay.
is to write the procedures in a handbook, which you all don't usually look at, to be
All right,
honest.
so it's
it's
let
up to you.
let me ask, where are people? Do you want to vote on it tonight? Are people pretty sure where they're at?
I think we should wait because I guess while I've already said how I want to vote, I do really like the suggestion of educators, staff, phone use, to sort of, whether that's in conjunction with students, whether everybody's part of the same team, if that's kind of the culture that's going to be created. Has that been thought about and could that be worked out?
Yeah, I can get you all the details more so of the procedures. We can add that to the procedures. That would just be something normally that's talked about with staff, but we can absolutely easily put it in writing.
And would we want, there's no public comment tonight about this. Why would we vote on it? There's been a survey, but I don't know if we want 400 students at the next meeting, but that seems like the transparent
it'll
way to
happen.
do it.
You'll get students, but that's okay. That's part of the process. I'm just saying, I think it's, yeah, I kind of feel that way too, but go ahead.
I would just say that, a lot of what we're asking for is actually not our role to sort of manage the procedure and how it's implemented at the staff level. We're passing policy, and I think, I don't know, if we're having a meeting on June 28th and we have to spend the money by June 30th,
That's true.
I just, why would we wait if the research is clear, it was on our agenda, it was sent out to people?
Was not.
Yeah, it's more procedural. Even if you don't have to have all the details, I don't feel I have to have all the details of how you're going to run it. But because we didn't say this is an action item,
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just feel like
We wanna
if
follow
if
the
we
usual
voted,
practice.
even if everybody's, oh, this is great, some people are going to feel like, hey, I was left out of this conversation.
Sure.
It didn't tell me you were going to vote on it tonight.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's more, for me, it's more procedural in that end.
That makes
I'm
sense.
not as concerned about, if you have a few more details,
Yeah.
great, but I'm not really worried
Okay,
about.
I could put some more details together. I do feel really
That
good
makes sense.
about the number of respondents we got on the survey,
Yeah.
which clearly stated it was cell phones and start time. So that's good. Hopefully that's a true representation of our community and
Yeah,
what
I
they
think
think
so.
about this issue.
I'm less concerned about that
Yeah.
as just
But we need to follow the procedure for the agenda.
showing that we're being transparent. And, if it were an action, you're right. If it was on the agenda and it said action, we could just vote on
Yeah,
it, but not
makes
because
sense.
it didn't say that. It appears like, oh, we're just talking about it.
Mhm.
And that way, if someone does want to come to a public session, if we do need to put it in the gym, fine,
Right.
we'll do that. But I think, is everyone okay with that? Yeah. I just want to know, do you want to vote tonight? No, tell me how you're feeling. I'm really.
It's not that I have a preference of when to vote. Anxiety. I think the longer we wait, the more anxiety will brew over the whole thing. But I agree with the whole concern about it having not been noted as an action item on the agenda. I think that is a big concern. And to touch on the whole issue of anxiety, it is going to result in some anxiety. And there may even be some meltdowns from some students who use their phone as a coping mechanism.
Yes.
But I can speak from personal experience as a parent, to be honest with you. My youngest son used his phone as a coping mechanism, and it wasn't healthy. It was not a healthy coping mechanism, and it brought me into his day in a place that I didn't belong in his day, where he should have been relying on his teachers and staff here at the school instead of me. And it was not healthy for either of us, and it wasn't productive. And I think taking that piece away for a lot of students is going to be a positive thing, very healthy thing.
Parents will have anxiety.
Absolutely.
Some will, sure. Yeah.
Trust me, I am, and I don't even have kids in school anymore, and yeah. I understand, I can empathize.
No, I understand that too. Because that's the other culture shift that has happened with phones, is that it's brought the parents into the school day that was never a part of how it just wasn't part of it. And now it's part of it. So now you're asking families to, oh no, you don't need to do that. So there is going to be some folks who are, even if a majority of families are like, yes, take them, there will be some who will say, hey, wait a minute. I know my kid's okay, but you got to know your kid's okay, because this is how it works. Yeah, Carolyn.
I don't know if this is just totally false, but I've heard for a while back when I was in like middle school and I was part of Odyssey of the Mind, and a lot of the competitions would happen at Brunswick High School. Isn't there some like data or like Wi-Fi block in place so like students don't go on their phones as often? That's what I've been told from like other students.
No, the sites are blocked, and but if we have Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
there's Wi-Fi.
Yeah. I don't know where I heard that from, but I was just wondering if this had been a thing that's been like how we were talking about with the late start time, like have we been in contact with other schools about it at all, or
About the cell phone
Yeah.
use. There are a few schools that some of the assistant principal and the dean of students reached out to. I personally haven't done that yet. But yeah, there are schools in Maine who are doing this that we reached out to. So, and one in Massachusetts as well is the one we based a lot of our procedures off of, because it was going well there. So we took a model that we knew was working.
Okay. Megan, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, I'm in support of it too, but voting on it tonight, like I purposely made sure I read over the agenda to know if I had to be ready to
Right.
make a decision. So you're kind of this gives me anxiety that I was not prepared to fully make a decision. And then going along, I just want to note too that, well, like what Anita said, like her son, involving the parent, I think there are parents too that are not in the best way reaching out to their students during the day that could cause stress to their student because anyway.
Yeah.
And so making that not happen. And when you mentioned like the dog, like finding out at school is probably not the best place to find out that your dog died. And I'm not discrediting anyone's thing, but those are the kind of things you find out at a appropriate time so that you can continue on with your. And then I'll also say, like, my daughter will text me, I don't feel good. Can you come pick me up? Like, okay, this isn't how it works. You have to go.
That's actually a huge problem.
Tell the nurse first, tell your teacher you don't feel good. They'll send you to the office. You're going to see the nurse or something. And so that's my own experience.
Let's
Quickly,
yeah.
I guess the other piece I'd like to know about is that, is a phone one of those tools that somebody can say, because of my diagnosis, I have to have it with? I mean, in terms of a technology that they need to communicate with, or their anxiety, or any kind of diagnosis that would say, I can exempt out of this because I can prove I need this as a use.
We
don't
do
know.
that only in the very occasional exception in an IEP, but often it might be for calming music, or many of the things could be adapted for their Chromebook use. So it's not a cell phone specific accommodation.
Okay, we're gonna move on since we're not gonna vote on it tonight. Katie, thank you for everything. Certainly took a lot of work in all of this. Thank you very much. And we got to get through a few more things tonight. Thank you all for your patience. So now we are at the first reading of board policies, which is no action tonight. What is that? Copyright compliance administrative procedure. Did anyone have any questions about that? Okay. 11.4. Now this is, remember we added 2 more that you have the copies in front of you. So there are 5 different out-of-state field trip requests. We okay taking it all together? May I have a motion?
I move to approve the field trip request.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Second, all right. Any further discussion regarding it? Yeah, you have a
Did one
question?
question, there was one form where I couldn't tell the funding source. It said OJ or something on it. I was just curious, JO? What is JO?
Which one are you looking at?
It's,
No, that
Big
was
one.
Special Olympics, SO.
oh, it's SO, Special Olympics.
So
That's
it's
a
not
Special
lost in the
Olympic one.
district, it's Special Olympics.
So
It's SO. Or junior, oh. JO.
Special Olympics.
That's
Special.
Yeah.
okay.
We don't put an S.
Right.
Yeah,
That was
okay. All right, so with that clarification, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. We move on to personnel items. Patrick?
So just a couple resignations. Janelle Skilling, who worked in our office, like to thank her for 1 year of service. Rachel Schoenberg, grade 1 teacher at Woolwich, thank her for 1 year of service. And also Samantha LaPointe, who's a special ed teacher at Dyke Newell School. Retirement, Tamara Seekins, a food service assistant for us at Dyke Newell School. She's been with the district for 18 years, either in a sub capacity or food service assistant. So would like to thank her for her commitment to RSU1. And then under nominations, we have 2 this evening. One is the nomination of Connor Walsh to be the new Bath Middle School principal. And you can see the interview committee was large, 13 people. We had 4 applications. We interviewed 2 people, and you can see Connor's educational background. And currently, he's the assistant principal at Freeport Middle School, and also served as the interim principal at Mass Landing School in Freeport. And prior to that, he was an assistant principal in Fitchburg, Mass. So the committee was very impressed with him. So that is our nomination for BMS principal. And the second one we have is Amy Bennett for pre-K teacher at Fitchburg Elementary School. And Amy has been in the district for a couple of years as an ed tech at Dyke Newell, and most recently as the library ed tech at Fitchburg.
Great. Okay, the 12.0, we've got
I
the,
just need you guys to make
Approve it.
Yeah.
I
make a motion.
make a motion to approve those nominations.
oh, that's right. Second? Okay, all in favor? Okay. So that's done. Those are approved. And 12.0, approval of.
Yeah, we have one staff person in your backup that we're recommending to go from P2 to continuing contract. And I explained, why that person wasn't on the original list last time. So we just need a motion.
Just need
to
a
approve
motion
her.
for that?
Yes.
Move to approve approval of probationary teacher to continuing contract.
And second. All right, all those in favor? Thank you. Now we're going to move into executive session. I'm going to need a motion pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D to discuss labor contract negotiations. So can I have a motion?
Make a motion to enter executive session.
Second? Okay, all in favor? We're moving in executive session. You two can take off, get done all that last minute homework you have to get done. Okay, and so now I need a motion to approve the AFSCME contract.
I move to approve the Ask Me contract.
Yeah, for 2024 to 2027.
2024, 2027 proposed contract
Okay.
between RSU1 Board and the AFSCME bargaining
AFSCME,
unit.
yep. All right, and may I have a second? And Patricia seconds. Any other further questions on this? All in favor? And we pass that. So that is done. Any board goals reference, Jennifer? No, I don't think we need your good move. It's like, no, just make the meeting faster. All right, next meeting date. So everybody, it's next Tuesday, 6 o'clock here at the high school. And then June 24th for the next. Adjourn, please. Need a motion to adjourn? Second? Okay, we're out. That's good. You guys are done.
I'm not doing
You're
it
like,
every
I'm
day.
just